Okay, let's go to the top of the file. We've got our theme, sense of self. We've got our thesis. Marina Esplot uses diction and characterization in bilingual way to prove to young readers that their own sense of self comes from their parents' identities and their own decisions. And then our first main idea, which we wrote yesterday, where we're using diction right here to prove that children develop a sense of self by blending their parents' identities with who they choose to be. Remember that a big part of your main ideas here is mutating your thematic statement throughout your essay, so it's not redundant. And then we've got our first evidence. I actually changed my evidence a little bit. I wanted to embody that the speaker is using words like separate and cut alongside her father's Spanish words, and that first link is we want to explain the evidence, or what we learn about the speaker through the evidence. So what I think we learn is that through the negative connotations of the author's use of English words and the father's use of Spanish, and the father's, direct statement in Spanish, readers learn that the author is struggling to find acceptance of her newfound identity that embraces both the English language and her father's identity. So the conflict that we see here that we want to talk about in link 1 is what the author is struggling with. Like, what does this tell us the author is struggling with? Well, separate and cut, along with the Spanish phrase, tells us that she's struggling with how she's defining herself. That's our conflict, right? It's your standard conflict. It's man versus self in this case, because it deals with self-identity. So that's where you explain that in link 1. And you're always essentially going to answer the question here is, what are readers learning about the speaker? And then in the second link, that's where you want to go and get away from the text-specific references and move into the real world, like the holistic message behind what the speaker is saying. And that holistic message here is, again, I'll type here, the blended diction of the two languages shows how many second-generation Americans have to straddle multiple heritages, combining aspects of both in order to create a self-identity. And the second link deals explicitly with the theme and explicitly with the real world. Notice we don't mention specifically the text itself here. We can tell that she's a second-generation American because her father, through context clues, we can tell that her father was not from here, and he has this heritage that he wants to bring his daughter up in. But at the same time, she's got to make these decisions herself, which is it's a truth about life. It's a truth about growing up as a second-generation American. I mean, your parents are first generation. They have these cultural traditions that they don't want to lose, and then you, as a second-generation American, or second-generation Americans in general, have these this new culture that they're exposed to through society, through school, through work, through their friends, and it's this influence that they're not getting directly from their parents, so they have to straddle both their parents' culture and the one that they want to, or the one that they're living. So we have to write about that, and here is what the speaker shows us. Through her diction, she's showing us that words like English words and Spanish words, there's this combination of two cultures, and that's how she's identifying herself.